Good evening and welcome to another edition of Conservative Corner. I'm your host, Tom Mountain. I am the District Republican State Committee man for Newton and also Brookline and Wellesley, and I have been a Republican activist in the area for many, many years, in addition to being a regular columnist for the Newton Tab way back when the Newton Tab was the paper of record and was recognized as such in Newton. I also wear different hats, and important ones at times, I might add. And one of the hats that I'm wearing tonight, that I'm proud to actually, is I am also the vice chair and founder of the Republican Jewish Committee of Massachusetts. So at times we will touch on issues that are not only not specific to Newton, although they are, but they concern all of us in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and beyond. And tonight, for that purpose, I have a very special guest that we're about to welcome, and his name is Dr. Charles Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs, I'm very glad to have him here tonight because he has an important message to talk about and a little bit about his background. He is among certainly the most distinguished citizens in Newton, if not the Commonwealth. He is the founder of the American Anti-Slavery Group, which for a decade or more, if not beyond, basically went to Africa, East Africa, Sudan, and surrounding areas to free slaves. And I'm emphasizing that, free slaves who were there in the 1990s. And he and his group managed to free hundreds of them, for which he was given a very prestigious award by the then mayor of Boston in 2000, and also Coretta Scott King, which was a Freedom Award, the first that they gave out at that time. Since then, he has been the founder of the David Project, the Americans for Peace and Tolerance, and currently, those are pro-Israel groups, and currently he is the founder and catalyst and leader behind the Jewish Leadership Project, which is why he's here and what he's going to elaborate on. Charles, thank you so much for coming. So please tell us, you have been an activist for Jewish-related causes, but not just that, as I touched on the American Anti-Slavery Group, which was really a magnificent group. And, I remember writing a long time ago that, at the risk of you blushing, that you should have been awarded, or at least put into consideration for the Nobel Peace Prize for that. What you did was extraordinary in helping to secure the release of hundreds, if not thousands, of African slaves in the modern era, which very few people knew and were cognizant of at the time. And of course, since then, you have been involved in very pro-Israel initiatives, foremost of which is the Jewish Leadership Project. So at the risk of my elaborating on that, I'd rather you. So please, do tell us what it is and what it entails.
Okay, so thanks for having me, Tom. And thank you for making me blush, the first thing out of the box. Look, I have spent about the last 35 years of my life fighting for human rights and for against, I would say, the external enemies of the Jewish people. And since we have got a new kind of anti-Semitism, which is against Israel, it's no longer that we killed, gods, or that we poisoned the wells, or that we are racial vermin, according to the Nazis. Now we are the creators of a racist apartheid state, and therefore that's the reason to hate us today. So I woke up to that about 35 years ago. I helped Andrea Levin create the Boston branch of CAMRA, which is one of the best organizations ever. And I fought the media bias, and I fought the professoriate, which was against Israel, the campus groups, the liberal churches that are against Israel, Louis Farrakhan, et cetera, et cetera. I fought against the Newton schools inculcating our students with anti-Israel curricula. And I came to a conclusion. My partner, in crime, Avi Goldwasser, who made many films with me and is a strategic thinker, he and I came to the conclusion that all the good Jews who fought these fights, we were sticking our fingers in the dike, and we were only doing that because Jewish leadership, the people with the money and the power and the voice and the platforms, were failing us. I mean, we should have been sitting on a beach all these years. And having the ADL, which has $100 million a year, and the federations, the Combined Jewish Philanthropies in Boston, the JCRCs in Boston, it was their failure that activated so many good Jews around the country. And I'm very happy to know all of those Jews around the country. But we have concluded that without good leadership at a national level and that's highly funded and that has the platforms, the Jews may not prevail against a tsunami of Jew hatred that is now assaulting us ideologically and now physically. And that's coming from 4 ideological camps. It's like a perfect storm all together at one time. Yes, you have the right-wing white supremacists, neo-Nazis. You'll always have them. They will always be there. But you also have the left, the anti-Zionists. And you also have now a surge in black anti-Semitism. And you also have imams, radical Muslims who are preaching that Jews are the sons of monkeys and pigs in mosques around the country that nobody wants to talk about. So here's the problem. Let me give you some statistics. In 2020, the FBI reported that a Jewish person was about twice as likely to suffer from a hate crime as a black or a Muslim, 10 times more likely than an Asian or a Latino. That was in 2020. And then just in New York City, where Jews are concentrated, in 2021, there were 200 attacks on Jews in the year 2021. Last year, it went to 300 attacks on Jews, almost one a day. And you can see on videos, mostly young black people beating up people who look very Jewish in New York. And the problem is that the hatred against Jews is coming mostly from other minorities. It's not white supremacists who are the majority of people. I mean, they're dangerous, they have guns, they want to make big massacres, and we have to worry about that. But on a day-to-day basis, the Jews are attacked mostly from the 3 other sources. And it's those 3 sources that our establishment groups don't want to talk about. These are the inconvenient anti-Semites, right? They'd rather focus on white supremacists. Why? Because no one's going to argue about that. There's no internal disagreement in the Jewish community about that Nazis are bad, or any other community as far as I know. But when you get to attacking Ilhan Omar, or if you have to go against college professors who inculcate people every day on college campuses throughout the world, throughout the country, that Israel is the worst possible nation state. When you're talking about Islamic anti-Semitism, these things are politically incorrect, and our leadership is terrified to talk about it. So we're heading into this tsunami of Jew hatred. We're flying blind. And we've decided that, just another statistic, from 2018 until last year, 97% of anti-Jewish hate crimes in New York were committed by other minorities. 69% by black, 17% by Arabs and Muslims, 11% by Hispanics, and only 3% by whites. And if you look at what the ADL is doing, the ADL is the Defense Department of the Jewish people with $100 million a year. It's the opposite. Their focus is on the 3%, not the 97%, because why? Because their hearts are not with the Jews. Their hearts are with the Democratic Party and the left and liberal ideology, plus they don't have a whole lot of courage. And so what are the Jews going to do?
Charles, I think that an example of that, which is indicative of where the mindset is of the Jewish philanthropies, the Combined Jewish Philanthropies in particular, sent out a fundraising letter, and they stressed on their masthead, I believe it was either a photo or a story about white supremacists at an overpass in Southern California that held up an anti-Jewish banner.
Right.
And there were just a few of these ridiculous white guys who were doing that. And so they used that as a rallying cry that anti-Semitism is a problem, it's a danger, and look at these white guys with this anti-Semitic banner. And that really emphasizes your point, because white supremacy, whatever it is, whoever they are so minimal in this country. And we constantly hear about this threat, but I mean, really, I mean, honestly, since the bombing of the the government building in Oklahoma City in the 1990s with Timothy McVeigh, what have they really done? I mean, seriously, and specifically in terms of anti-Semitism, as you said, they've always been there. The neo-Nazis have been there since long before, going back long before World War II, and also updated to the Skokie incident in Illinois in the 1970s to today. So you'll always have that fringe element. But to your point, and it's a glaring point, that most of the anti-Semitism happens is from minority communities, targeting the Jews, targeting those Jews who are visible, perhaps the Orthodox Jews in New York, and in Los Angeles and elsewhere. But I think that it's not only there, but you alluded to, you know, we could almost say, okay, in communities where you're going to have ethnic communities clashing with each other, which has happened over the centuries in our big cities. But what's most alarming is that it's also happening in our intellectual centers, which are the universities. For example, in universities now, many students are reluctant to visibly identify as Jews with yarmulkes, with Magen David, Stars of David, having pro-Israel tables, posters, programming on the campuses. And these aren't just, shall we say, average run-of-the-mill colleges. We're talking some of the most prestigious universities in America. Could you touch on that theme, please?
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, for years we have been fighting Northeastern University, where they were tearing down menorahs on Hanukkah, where they were, I mean, Jews now, I think 30% of Jews say that they're afraid, hesitant to show that they're Jewish on campus, because the campus groups, incited by decades of anti-Israel biased teaching from the professoriate, you have all of the leftist groups lined up against the Jews. And here's where the Jews don't quite understand what's happened, because the liberalism of our fathers' days in some way protected Jews as minorities just like everybody else who lived in a nice country. And we were all going to be in the melting pot. We were all going to be equally respected. Well, what's happened is that progressivism has defeated classical liberalism. And it's no longer what you and I believe, equal opportunity for every individual. It's a demand for equal outcomes for every individual. And certain groups, America, according to this ideology, is divided between oppressors and oppressed. And the oppressed are, you know, named groups: blacks, Latinos, Muslims, Arabs, transgenders, homosexuals. And the Jews got kicked off this team because the Jews are adjacent whites. Mm-hmm. Our prosperity is a proof point that we have oppressed other people, because according to this ideology, if some group is doing better than another group, the only reason it can be is that they are oppressing them. And Jewish prosperity is a proof point that we're one of the biggest oppressors. So the Jewish community hasn't really digested that the liberalism which they loved has been defeated by progressivism. And the left now consists of this intersectional ideology, which is structurally anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. And this is being taught in the schools. The critical race theory business is being pushed into the schools, and soon every American child will hear that Israel is a white colonialist nation needlessly oppressing darker-skinned, indigent, innocent Palestinians. And if American Jews are supporting Israel, that means, by this definition, that we're racists. Horrible thing.
You know, Charles, during the Trump administration, we in the among Republican Jewry, I call us the 1/3 who do vote consistently Republican, We were able to get that message out because we had the backing of the administration. In other words, today what you're seeing is now you have a very left-wing administration in Washington, and where the Trump administration got away from this whole, shall we say, Israel-Palestinian issue, and they morphed the whole thing into peace in the Middle East, and they were able to broker a peace between Israel and 5 Arab nations, which was extraordinary. And that now we have a Biden administration which has brought us back to this whole Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which was always overemphasized and overhyped. So now on college campuses, the radicals are emboldened with this because they have really at least the rhetorical backing of the administration in Washington and a good portion of Congress. So the point being is that now we're faced with the whole anti-Israel sentiments on campus. I feel, based on just observing what's happened over the few years, have been fueled by the administration, or shall we say, the indifference of the administration in Israel. Now, for example, vis-a-vis Israel, for example, we actually, in the last administration, it got to the point where anti-Semitism on college campuses was a major priority, and regulations and laws were put in place to prevent that. Now this administration has really walked back away from that quietly, and ignoring the fact and ignoring the threat on college campuses.
Well, that's because the left wing of the Democratic Party, especially the Squad,
yeah,
the Jihad Squad, is extremely leftist, anti-Israel. Ilhan Omar. So what are the Jews supposed to do, right? We would think that Jewish establishment leadership would fight against this. Mm-hmm. But because they're mostly Democrat, and they're Democrat in their hearts, they won't go after anti-Semites who are Democrats. So right now, Kevin McCarthy wants to kick Ilhan Omar off of the Foreign Relations Committee, which he should, because she's an anti-Semite. She says Jews control with money. She hates Israel. It's the Benjamins. The same thing, if any white person said it, everybody would say, well, there's obvious anti-Semites. She said it, and she hates Israel, and she stands up as much as she can to say lies and biased things against the Jewish state. So you'd think that Democratic Party Jewish leaders, elected ones, would agree with Kevin McCarthy. We don't want her on the Foreign Relations Committee, right? They're not. They're backing her. The ADL, the people who have my treasury, my children's and grandchildren's money to fight against Jew hatred, they're not saying a thing about that because they'd rather be Democrats.
You know, Charles, the Anti-Defamation League has really become irrelevant to the Jewish community in America, and just in terms of the major issues facing Jews, which are, of course, as you say, anti-Semitism in general, and also the anti-Israel and anti-Jewish bias on the college campuses, and now with the critical race theory in the public schools, high schools, and elementary schools. They've been, not only have they been ineffective in dealing with this, but they seem completely clueless in dealing with this. For example, the current chair of the ADL, the fellow named Jason Greenblatt, I
Not
believe.
Jason. Greenblatt.
Greenblatt,
Yeah.
yes. That Jason Greenblatt,
No.
he was a chief
different.
negotiator in the
Right.
Trump administration, which brokered the peace. So forgive me, real Jason Greenblatt. But anyway, so this guy was a top official in the Obama administration. And after leaving the Obama administration, very left-wing administration, anti-Israel administration, what does the ADL do? They put him in charge of the advocacy, what was supposed to be the main advocacy group for Jews in America. It makes no sense.
Well, it didn't make sense. What they thought, I think, was that Hillary Clinton was going to become president, and he was close to Hillary Clinton, and that would be a smart thing. But it wasn't a smart thing at all, because he's absolutely terrible. He's done horrible things. Their training, they have, you know about what happened with Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, in New York who posted an anti-Semitic video, and he was fined and kicked off the team, and the ADL took money from him as a way. It was like selling indulgences. He said, "I'm sorry," and the ADL took lots of money from him, and they were going to use that money to do trainings, across the country. Look, the problem is the Jewish community doesn't understand the basic changes that have happened in American culture that have killed classical liberalism, has defeated classical liberalism, and have gotten us into a situation where Jews are seen as oppressors, white oppressors, and the Jewish community leadership hesitates to deal with anti-Semites who come from minority communities. And because of that, we started the Jewish Leadership Project. We have teams in 15 cities across the country who are challenging their local JCRCs and federations and ADLs.
Jewish Community Relations
Jewish
Councils
Community
and
Relations
Federation,
Councils.
yes.
And in fact, in Boston, finally, after all of this time, finally, after decades and decades, the Combined Jewish Philanthropies, which is the Jewish Federation, is coming out with a 5-point plan to fight anti-Semitism. It says, why we would trust people who failed over the last 20 years to lead us out of this, I don't know. But for anybody who cares to listen to a critical discussion of what they say they're going to do, we invite you to a Zoom discussion on February 12th. You can email me and I'll give you a link, charlesjacobs123@gmail.com. And we're going to have an open discussion of what they say they're going to do about anti-Semitism, which is, from what we can see, is just wholly inadequate and shameful. So we're fighting back. We've got a book coming out in May. The book is called The Failure of Jewish Leadership in Our Time. It's got over 20 essays by people like Alan Dershowitz and Mort Klein and Caroline Glick and Thane Rosenbaum and myself and Avi Goldwasser and others, people from around the country who will give you analyses and reports from the field about what local JCRCs and ADLs are failing to do when anti-Semitism comes surging into their communities. So we shall undercome. That's the thing. There's got to be 30 or 40% of Jews in America who really understand this failure of Jewish leadership. Even though we don't want to have fights within our community, it's too late for that. We've got to come out and push them and shame them, and we've got to get to the donors of these groups who are making terrible mistakes with their investment in people who don't know what they're doing, don't have courage to do the right thing, and don't really have an understanding of what anti-Semitism is in the modern day time.
You know, Charles, the Combined Jewish Philanthropies of Greater Boston, they get an enormous amount of money. And yes, they run social services and schools and whatnot, but just in terms of dealing with blatant anti-Semitism and, shall we say, such as painting swastikas, this and that, they can deal with that effectively. And somebody could paint a put a swastika in the boys' room at one of the high schools, and they'll all go ballistic. But what they have a problem with, to your point, is what's been happening in the local universities and the schools with this subtle anti-Semitism through curriculum.
Well, I know that
which
personally, because in Newton schools, when we found out, when students actually, when they came on Jackie Morrissey's program a long time ago, and we started to hear that Newton schools teachers were teaching that Israel stole the land. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is Judea and Samaria. That's where Jews come from.
Yes.
The Jews stole the land, and that they needlessly oppressed people, and that they kill Arab women, they torture Arab women in Israeli. Jews were torturing Arab women in Israeli jails. This is all Arab propaganda, and they were teaching it to the kids. And when we heard that, we tried to find out what they were teaching, and they wouldn't let us. So you had to go for a Freedom of Information Act. It costs money to. I'm a taxpayer in Newton. It costs me money. It costs parents money for them to tell you what they're teaching in the schools. Well, we gathered all the material, we gave it to Camera, which is a scholarly, the best group there is on this material. Camera put out a 100-page booklet showing how every one of these lessons was Arab propaganda. Let's debate about whether or not there's going to be a Jewish state, whether there should be. Well, we're not debating about whether the Germans ought to have a state. We're not debating about whether the Chinese ought to have a state after. So it was all really, really dangerous. Because the students didn't know how to contest this. So what happened was the Jewish Community Relations Council and the Combined Jewish Philanthropies went to the mayor and said to her, well, these people are exaggerating. Well, you know,
Making excuses.
They covered it up.
Making excuses.
So that's why we said, Avi Goldwasser and I said, how are we going to win if the big boys in the block are covering for...
You know, Charles, also, I think that it also gets back to the fact that a lot of the teachers in general, public schools in particular, are very left-wing. So they adhere to this left-wing mindset, which will demonize Israel as a neo-colonial power. And then they will transmit that as much as possible to the students. But we have about 2 minutes left. What else would you like to? Would you like to give out addresses or of something specific, how one gets in touch with your organization?
JewishLeadershipProject.org, Americans for Peace and Tolerance, peaceandtolerance.org, or if you would like to get involved with us, just email me, charlesjacobs123@gmail.com, and I can, we have people joining us every day. We have newsletters that go out, we have videos that go out. This will be a video that will go out. So it's time for the Jewish people to really understand that there is nobody there that's going to protect us except ourselves. This is always how it's been. And we've been comfortable for too long, and now it's a new time in America, and it's time to get serious and do what we have to do.
And while anti-Semitism has certainly always been with us throughout history, and it has been less so in America, but it's still there, it's still prevalent, and every so often it does raise its ugly head in various forms. And to your point, that nowadays, it's not the old American Bund of the 1940s. Now it's the, sad to say, minority groups, especially the black community.
Well, I just want to say one thing. The neo-Nazi people that you know and I know, I mean, they've always been there.
Yes.
Right? They got very excited when the world figured out a new way to attack Jews through Israel.
Yes.
You know, they were sitting back and what could they do? They were thrown out of decent society. But when Israel got to be targeted by the left and by the radical Muslims, then the neo-Nazis felt they could jump in, and that's when they
You're
jumped
fighting
in.
the good fight, Dr. Jacobs, Charles. We're very glad that you're here, and we'd like to have you come back again and to elaborate further. Thank you so much for coming in. Please, folks, tell all your friends about this program, and we will see you next month for another edition of Conservative Corner. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.